It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, the governor of the great state of Texas, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul. How's it going?
I'm doing great, Michael. Have you done all those 1,100 K1s yet?
We're most of the way through it, so still slugging it out. Hopefully by February 15th, we got all our apartment entities done, and then we got to do our holding companies and then individual returns. And so we're the Accountant Full Employment Act certainly is in full effect over at SPI. The amount of professional fees we pay between lawyers and accountants is staggering every year.
Again, what are K1s and what is that?
So we've acquired 40 apartment complexes in our professional career as sponsors and helped other people on top of that do dozens more. But every time we do it, we'll go out and raise capital. So if you have to raise, $10 million and you need 7 of your closest friends to give you $125,000 each to raise $10 million, each investor gets when you file your tax return in the year, you get a K1. So that's kind of the schedule in the tax return that then shows the ownership percentage of the individual investor in the deal. And that's what they take when they file their personal return. And pro tip to apartment syndicators out there, the people that don't do this for a living, that have straight jobs, they file their tax returns on time. So you need to get your K1s out early, because otherwise you'll be harassed by all your investors asking where their K1 is so they can file their tax return and get their refund in March. So the first year or two we did that and we didn't get the returns done on time. I made it a personal mission to get all my K1s out by February 15th so I don't have to be asked hundreds of times where my K1 is. And another pro tip, what we do is we tend to start with the entities that have the most K1s in them, and then we work our way down, because that kind of eliminates more and more of those questions earlier on. So those are just life lessons learned the hard way from an apartment syndicator.
1,100 of them.
Yeah, and then next year, God knows what 2020's tax return will be. Who knows more?
God love you and your Accountant Full Employment Act that you support.
That's for sure.
No kidding. Don't forget, April 2020, we are going to have the Dr. Mark Dotzer is going to be up in the Grapevine Convention Center. If you know Mark Dotzer, if you've been to one of his seminars, he's the chief economist. Was a chief economist for Texas A&M Real Estate. He's the guy that everybody listens to about apartment financing, commercial real estate, economics around the world. I mean, just global. He has a global position, and funnier than hell. And the way he presents, it takes a pretty complicated subject and breaks it down to that lower shelf that you can really understand it. So make sure you go on to oldcapitalpodcast.com and register RSVP for that event. Again, we usually have 400, 500, 600 people at those events. So make sure you do that. That'd be great. Also, too, Michael, James Zhang, and myself, we put together a 17-page white paper report on multifamily financing 101. That is an interesting one because it kind of gives you the playbook of what you should be looking for or what you can expect for financing of apartments. Again, I've done this for 35 years. I've closed 5,700 apartment loans. Now you have a chance to jump into our head and kind of give you the backstory of what needs to be done, how to structure these deals. So whether you use Old Capital and lending or you use somebody else, at least you have some just general knowledge about what's going on and what to expect. And then we're trying to get 1,000 5-star ratings on iTunes. And if you think we bring value to you and to your questions on around Ask Mike Mondays, go give us a 5-star review, thumbs up on that. We would appreciate that. And again, also go to into Old Capital Podcast and ask the question. Ask the question to Michael. Again, Michael, he was with one of the largest national banks in the country. He led his division, multiple years in a row. He did billions of dollars of commercial real estate lending, and then he transitioned over from loaning money to owning real estate. And so we share his knowledge about what's going on, what to expect, for a guy who has purchased over $1 billion in apartments with his group over at SPI, Strategic Property Investments. They've done over 40 transactions, as he said, 8,600 apartment units. And, he kind of has the insight of what's going on. And so we do appreciate his time. So we want to ask him a question because I think it's probably timely. A lot of people have owned real estate in the past, and whether they owned it out in California or Virginia, they owned it by themselves, and maybe they got X amount of dollars on the sale, and they put it into a 1031, and they wanted to reinvest it. So here's the question. Michael, I just recently sold a property. I have 1031 funds, and now I want to invest in a syndication. Is that possible?
No. So, no, but yeah, that's a very common thing. And, certainly we'll give the disclosure. I'm not a tax professional, neither is Paul, so I'll get tax advice. But this is kind of my experience just from doing this business and being involved in many 1031s. The short answer is, the way I understand it, is when you sell, say you have a small commercial building, or hell, in California, a single family house on the beach or something like that, and you sell it, you make, put $1 million in your accommodator. You want to go buy into an apartment complex in Texas or Georgia or somewhere else, and you want to do it into syndication because you're a doctor or a busy professional. You don't want to do this for a living. You want to live in Hermosa Beach, and you don't want to live in Dallas. So you find someone like me, and you want to do a 1031. Typically, the thought is, well, hell, I can sell. I've sold a piece of real estate. I'm going to invest into a partnership that's buying an apartment building, real estate. I should be able to do 1031. But the answer is that's not the case, because when you sell a piece of real estate, you own title to it. And when you invest into syndication, you're a member of an entity. And in our case, you're a member of an LLC, or you're a partner in a partnership, or you're a shareholder in a corporation, whatever it is. But, most of these are LLCs. So you're going from real estate to membership interests. And so that's not like kind by the way the IRS designates it, which is my understanding. So the way around that, Paul, is people do what's called either DST or TIC. So DST is the Delaware Statutory Trust, or TIC or TIC, or is a tenant in common. So those are the various ways you could do it. So I'm not very familiar with the DST, so I can't really speak too intelligently about it. I know those are a little bit more complex and things like that. But, we have to help several people that have sold a building and come to Texas and done 1031s into a tenant in common, or TIC. So I have a little bit of firsthand knowledge. We actually just completed 2 of those, one in December, one in January. So we helped some people out. So I'm pretty familiar with kind of what we did. So kind of the basic rules when you're going about it. And certainly, again, you talk to a tax lawyer, because this stuff gets very, very complicated, and a lot of it's kind of form over substance. But these are just maybe some talking points when if you're thinking about doing something like this. So our scenario really, the one in December, I'll kind of use as a case study. We helped a group buy a property in Grapevine, Paul, in 2012. I think they bought it, and they were able to. They put a 10-year mortgage on it, and it was a 70s vintage deal. And I think they put a couple $1 million in it when they bought it, $2 million, maybe a little bit more. And about 3-4 years ago, we were able to help them put a supplemental loan on. So they cashed out all their money plus some, and then they owned it for a few more years, and ultimately ended up selling it. And I think they had a 7 multiple, Paul, some crazy number like that, in about 7 years.
So what does that mean?
Meaning they put $1 in, and over 7 years, the $1 turned into 7. So which is absolutely unbelievable.
It's like hitting the lottery.
Yeah, it was unbelievable what they were able to do, and that's what tells you kind of cap rate compression, because they they did some level of value add, but it wasn't like they did a ton. I mean, they just were able to just kind of ride the wave, and did a pretty good job operating it, but it was unbelievable. So we took that deal and ended up buying a brand new 27 vintage Class A deal, wrap construction. So they go from a garden style 2-story vinyl siding deal that's underparked and asphalt parking, and buy a trailer park in Grapevine, and we buy a brand new deal right off the highway in Dallas. So it was a pretty unbelievable trade with just $2 million of original capital basically in the deal. So it's just an unbelievable story of how powerful this cycle's been. But with that said, what we ended up having to do, and to qualify for the mortgage, I think I mentioned this on the last Ask Mike Monday, we were doing a deal, and they we have a pretty good track record on a lot of loans with Freddie Mac. And for them to qualify for Freddie Mac, there was 2 different loan quotes, one if we signed, one if we didn't sign. So we ended up putting some capital in the deal, signing the mortgage, because we got a materially better loan by doing so. And so we had to form what's called a tenant in common, or TIC. So basically what that means is they had their money, we had our money. So say they had 95% of the money, we had 5% of the money. There's 2 separate, when you buy a property, there's a warranty deed. It's kind of how you is the deed recording the sale. So when you do a tenant in common, or TIC, there's 2 warranty deeds, one for fee simple of 95% of the real estate, and one for 5% of the real estate in our case. So we have 2 separate entities, and we have two warranty deeds for the different percentages. So when you're doing a TIC, my basic understanding, to be compliant with the 1031 rules, when you put money in, you can't take disproportionate ownership, or you can't promote the deal. You can't put like a waterfall structure in or anything like that. Everything that dollar for dollar has got to go in pari passu. So if we need $1 million to do the deal, I put 100,000 in, you guys put 900,000 in, it's got to be a 90-10 deal. So the way you kind of work around it is if you do the deal, you can have other compensation as long as it's customary and market. So you can charge like an acquisition fee. You can charge asset management fees. You can have disposition fees, things like that kind of built into the deal. So that's kind of the way when you're restructuring a TIC and you're kind of a deal sponsor and you want to kind of make it and help someone out that has a 1031, maybe investor at 1031. Those are the types of compensation that you can put in, maybe construction management fee, something along those lines, but they have to be kind of customary and with market, or you can run afoul pretty easily of the 1031 law and rules. So those are some of the things that we kind of think about. So we were able to, like I said, they sold a property, made a big profit, and then we did help them with a 1031. We hired a tax lawyer, make sure they went through all the documents, because when you do a TIC or tenant common, you have what we had. We had an asset management agreement and we had a tenant in common agreement. And the TIC agreement really kind of outlines who's the managing TIC member, who controls the money, plus the revenue pays the bills, kind of makes the decisions. But ultimately, all major decisions have to be unanimous. So like I couldn't sell the building without their consent and vice versa, or refinance it without the consent and vice versa. So when you get into these deals, you got to kind of think of it, it's like a marriage, and you got to have 100% consent or you're going to have a problem down the road. Back in the bad old days, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they would do a lot of these kind of large TICs that all generally kind of end up getting in trouble, where you'd have 20, 30 people that would pool together, $20,000, $50,000 a piece, and they would go buy an apartment complex, and there would be a TIC member. But then when there was time to sell it or refinance it, you'd have to have 100% consent of everybody, and everyone had to sign the documents, and you'd have to chase these people down, and maybe this person got divorced and their wife wouldn't consent to something, or husband, and there was a bunch of horror stories. So I would certainly not recommend doing a very large TIC with many TIC members. If it's kind of like a 2-member TIC, like you and a partner, that's definitely a different story than if there's like 20 TIC members in it. I don't know if you have any war stories of that, Paul.
No, I mean, it's the bad old days were the bad old days, but they've kind of changed the rules on TICs and how many people that they're going to allow into the TIC structure itself. And they don't want 50, they don't want 40, they don't want 10. They usually want 5.
5 or less, yeah.
5 or less, just because you can get 5 people to possibly agree on what they're going to have for dinner. But you're never going to have 40 people or 50 people to agree with what's, do you want the salad or do you want the salmon? Yeah. So they've really reduced it down. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, or most lenders, are just down to 5 TIC members into a syndication or into a group. But going back, you brought up an interesting point, because isn't SPI usually an apartment syndicator? And you just told me that 1031 isn't allowed by syndicators. So why was SPI involved in that deal? Yeah,
so we just had, as we promoted last year, we do some advisory business. So we had a couple clients reach out to us that had sold a building, had a big profit, and they wanted help on kind of the 1031. So we helped them kind of get their 1031 home, basically, Paul. And it was just economically more advantageous if we were in the deal, just because of the debt financing we can get if I signed the mortgage versus if I didn't sign the mortgage. It would just materially better terms. So economically, it was more viable. Plus, obviously we like owning real estate, so we ended up putting some money alongside them and buying a brand new Class A building right off the highway in Dallas here recently.
Gotcha. And that typically is $15 million of equity that's brought in?
Yeah, that deal was in kind of the mid 40 millions purchase price. So we had, I can't remember what the exact number was, 14, 15 million, somewhere in that ballpark.
But that's kind of when the space that, if you did advisory work, that's what you would do.
Yeah, that's kind of where it starts making sense for us to do stuff like that.
Yeah. If people wanted to get more information about SPI, what's the best way of them doing it?
Yeah, simply just go to a company's website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy, advisory.com. There's a contact us form. Fill that out, and I'm always happy to have a 10 to 15-minute call with listeners I meet at the podcast.
That sounds great. All right, that was the governor, the mayor of the great state of Texas, Mr. Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.